town where basketball gets played. The Mavericks. You got Luka, Derek, Kyrie, and Klay, and Ben and Skin. Two flagrant foul mouth violations. They're gonna soak you. Ooh, rub-a-dub-dub. It's the Mavs Soaktacular Season Preview.
Here are your hosts for the Super Soaker, Ben and Skin. Ooh, soaked.
Hello and welcome to Ben and Skin's Mavs Soaktacular Season Preview Special. I'm Ben Rogers. He's Jeff Skin Wade. I hate it when I tune in to watch some of this shit and people meander too much without getting right into it. So let's dive right into it. I want to say this. I want to set my expectation level and I want to get yours. But I am as excited as I've ever been for a Maverick season going into this season. And my son asked me, he goes, well, what about 2011? I was like, that's a whole story. I didn't have high expectations. No, I think they surprised a lot of people. And so they went all the way to the finals last year. It was glorious. I think the team got even better. We can discuss the merits of that or debate that. But I am so excited about this season. My Mavs pants are on fire. I want to watch every second of the action. So I want to ask you, Jeff Skin Wade, what are your expectations or what is your excitement level for this Mavs season that fast approaches?
I have to know one thing from you before I give you the answer. Is your son aware of the whole one and done boys saga?
You know, you always think that your history, the things you've gone through would mean more to your kids than it does. I don't think they really care. I think I've probably told them 7 or 8 times. I doubt they care. But I did go into I was like, look, I called them the one and done boys. We were at ESPN. Since you're making me do this again.
No, you don't have to. I just want you to tell your son that story.
I need to own it. And it sucks so bad because Maverick fan, whole life, born and raised on Maverick basketball. Like it meant so much to both of us growing up here. And in 2011, we're at ESPN. Mark Friedman's our producer. He's like, man, I kind of wish you guys were less informed. And we were like, what do you mean? He goes, well, when I ask you if the Cowboys are going to be good this year, you give me this long list of reasons why they might or why they might not. I just want you to say they're either going to go to the Super Bowl or they're going to suck. Like, just take an opinion. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not really, it's, what the hell? Trying to find my voice in this business, and I decided to come out with a strong opinion. And it had hurt me that the Mavs kept getting bounced. So in 2011, all year long, I called them the one and done boys. The Mavericks are the one and done boys. They're going to get to the first round of the playoffs. They're going to get bounced. And then they went and wrote history. It was a glorious journey. And when they handed Mark Cuban the trophy, what did he say?
He said, they called us the one and done boys. And I was like, no, they didn't. Only that guy did. The guy sitting next to me, he was the only one. And here he is 13 years later blaming it on Mark Friedman. Rest in peace, Frito. I am so sorry that you can't live in the afterlife comfortably without Ben pinning that on you.
Was that hard to work for the Mavericks and have me with that strong line, they suck opinion?
Oh, yeah. You know, our friend Cash Soroy, who at the time was working for the Mavericks, he texted me in the middle of the playoff run and said, one and done, boys, huh? I was like, that wasn't me, motherfucker. Send it to Ben. You got his number. I never said that shit.
He never texted me.
Nuts.
He never texted me.
Yeah, he I think he was like, Skin's dodging it. But I can't tell us apart anyways back then. But no, dude, to go back to what you were saying, that was unexpected, even though I think they were a 3 seed. The Lakers were so good at the time and the Spurs were obviously, still really, really great team in the middle of their franchise years, dynasty years, I should say. So nobody picked the Mavericks to go win a championship. It was a beautiful surprise. Rick Carlisle himself called it lightning in a bottle. But they did have a really good team and a really deep team, and they did have an MVP, all-time great player. And so it kind of goes back to this whole idea of, can you get everything together working in concert at the right time if you have the right kind of roster to win a championship? And I think, let's see how injuries play out. Let's see how the wear and tear of the season plays out. Let's see how the Celtics handle their long run and their injuries and et cetera, and et cetera, et cetera, all those things. But the Mavericks do have a roster that can win an NBA title. if the things go right for them that they need to go right. And I'm as excited for this team as I have been for any Maverick team since going into the 2007 season, the year after they went to the finals. And remember, they got off to that incredible start. And I think, in the regular season, actually, they lost a couple games and went on a crazy tear. And I think we all thought this team's going to go to a bunch of finals. And then they wilted away, and then 2011 happened. This team has everything you need on its roster to go and win an NBA title. The one big question is going to be health. And then number two, will they be good enough defensively with the new guys they've added and how they're going to play to end up being the kind of team that can win an NBA championship? So, yes, I am as geeked as I've ever been. This is a really good team.
Dude, we have two of my favorite players ever to watch play the game of basketball on the same team, and Luka and Kyrie. Like, they're both just poetic with the basketball. It's just beautiful watching them paint this painting every night on television. It's gorgeous. And I love watching them play. They've got shooting. They've got defense. They've got bigs. They've got depth. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches at the big position to have Gafford as your backup center.
Yeah, it's huge, Ben, because also I think with the way Lively's evolving, and we'll talk about him, Lively, the second, the way he's evolving, we'll talk about that a little bit. But also in a smaller lineup, when you do have to go small, PJ Washington with his wingspan can play small ball five. And I think what people are going to see as the year rolls on is that if you do need to go to a small ball lineup, Najee Marshall can play small ball four. We'll talk about him a little bit later in this Mavs Soaktacular, but that's the thing is, people always talk about with the Golden State Warriors and their amazing run. They always talk about the lineup of death, and they talk about, when you got those five guys out there and nobody could match up with them. But what nobody talks about is they either had Andrew Bogut or Zaza Pachulia. They always had a big on their roster, so they didn't have to only play lineup of death. They could make teams match up to them. And I think when you see one of the most interesting stories that's going to unfold this year, and one of the most difficult things that J-Kid has to deal with, is the amount of competition. I mean, real competition at backup minutes. I'm talking about Hardy, Dinwiddie, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes. Who am I forgetting? If Omax ends up developing and wants to start getting minutes, Gafford's going to be coming off the bench. There's a lot of really solid, talented players that are going to have to earn minutes. And it's going to be difficult for him to not only juggle that, but make sure the guys that aren't playing at that time are engaged so that when they do get in, they do deliver. I didn't even throw Maxey in there. Maxey is finally, he's gotten older, but he's finally going to be in a position where they don't have to go give him 25 minutes a night and wear his ass down. Yeah. He's finally in that role. So this is a very deep and versatile team.
So I guess let's dive in. You're going to kind of talk about different guys. We'll talk about the new guys, the guys who left. We'll talk about guys who could take a leap. But let's talk about with the two big dogs. Let's talk about Luka and Kai. With Luka and Kai both, all I really care about is making sure that they're healthy and rested for a long playoff run at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Kai has surprised me with how healthy he was last year, how much he played. He played a lot more than I expected him to play. If you go back and look at his history, it's not always as available as he was last year. And that was a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
Luka is just going to get beat up. It's the nature of his game. He's always got the rock in his hand. He's like all-stot, the big fullback, tailback, getting 40 carries a game. He's going to get beat up. It's just he's always got the ball. People are always going to be physical with him. He's always going to attack the bucket. Their whole game plan is going to be physical against him. I think because of the depth they have, I think you could get to the postseason and have them in a good spot, rested somewhat, but not if Luka, and I don't mean this as in a personal attack or in any way. This is my favorite player, not named Dirk. If he wants the MVP, which I would want the MVP, he doesn't have one yet, and he should have got it last year. He was deserving candidate last year. if you want the MVP, you probably will play a ton and not want to come out of games as much. And I don't mean that as a slight, but that said, I would rather he was just healthy and rested at the end of the season. So specifically with Luka, is there a way for him to win the MVP and also be nice and rested, ready for the postseason?
Absolutely, there is. And again, this is one of J Kidd's difficult assignments, is making Luka see that. Guys usually, this is like an old NBA trope, they win the MVP the year after they're the MVP, because narratives are that die is usually cast pretty early on, and a lot of those guys voting, there's only a few Zach Lowe's out there that watch every damn game and then wake up the next morning and watch the games they missed. And so, there's narratives that form. And we see it on the big talk shows. Like Stephen A. Smith ain't watching a bunch of NBA ball. He's just not. He's latching on to whatever the story is, and he's blowing hard about it. And so what the number one thing Luka needs, everyone knows he's got numbers. Everybody, like if he goes out there and puts up the same numbers he put up last year, does that make him the MVP? What's going to make him the MVP is right out the gate, the Mavericks are a top 3 seed and they stay there. Because I think I'd have to go look. I didn't look at the odds. I think more people think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a more likely MVP candidate. Why? Because Oklahoma City was the number 1 seed last year, and they were, and he was far and away their best player. And I we can talk about this later if you want. I think they have way more pressure on him than the Mavericks do personally. I think the Thunder do. They've got a lot of interesting and tangible things they got to contend with, but they got a great team. So I think it's more important for the Mavericks to be a top 3 team record-wise in the West from the jump and let that continue. Because if you want to go back and look, Luka was putting up stupid numbers last year before, January, and the Mavericks were fiddle farting around 500 a bunch, or just a couple games over. And if you remember, they had a bunch of injuries, right? Kyrie was missing time. People don't even want to remember this. Tim Hardaway Jr. won them games in December last year. And so what I'm saying is that narrative of November and December, that was the narrative for the rest of the year. When you listen to talk shows and you listen to the talking heads, they were talking about, he's got numbers, but the Mavericks is like, have you seen their team lately? And I'm saying those narratives start early and they don't change. And so what the Mavericks need for Luka to win an MVP, just do what he normally does number-wise. Doesn't have to do anything extraordinary, but they got to be great from the jump record-wise and beat teams on national TV. That's how he will be the MVP.
Okay, I like that. Win those big games on national TV. He can rest on the work he put in last season when he probably should have been the MVP, and it's still possible. I can't wait to. And dude, he looks great.
Oh my God.
He looks thin. I know you never worry about that stuff. I know it's more of a Mavs Twitter thing, and I get sucked into it sometimes. I'm like, is he a little too bulky? Is he good? Like, he looks thin and ready to go to me.
Yeah, I thought he looked great. I hate that, he had the nagging injury, and so we can't see the full manifestation yet. But I'm unconcerned about his physical situation. I think, for me, it's more about what's going to happen through the course of the year, which is where their depth comes in. I can't wait to see how they actually employ Spencer Dinwiddie. I think that's one of the most interesting questions of the season, but also having Kai, and there's going to be moments where he's on the bench and Kai and Klay are out there together and the team is doing great. They're in a really good position offensively.
Let's talk about Kai. You have a great rapport with Kai. I enjoy your post-game interviews with him. There's genuine love and respect there, which is awesome. I just, you talk about basketball poetry and the love letters he writes to the game, like the spin, the handles, the skills. I've never seen anything like it, and people bring him up. People that have been studying the game, watching the game for a long time, mention him as possibly the most skilled basketball player ever. And what if he was 6'6"? Like, can you imagine how he might be the best player of all time? But he's just the way he plays the game is so beautiful. He just seems to be really happy in Dallas. They did a great job getting him here, keeping him here, and then making him feel welcome here. And I didn't know how it was going to work with Luka and Kai. I thought it was maybe not the best use of resources to have your second best player also be a guy who can be ball dominant. Mm-hmm. But I was wrong. They work together in unison so beautifully, and the rest of the team is now built around those two, and they appear to have phenomenal chemistry. And I find myself looking at that going, man, that might be the best 1-2 punch in the league, or it's at least in the discussion. I mean, it's without apology in the discussion for, is this one of the best 1-2 punches in all of basketball?
I can't remember exactly who started this thing during the beginning of the playoffs or the end of the regular season last year. I can't remember if it was the TNT crew or what, but talking about, is that the greatest offensive backcourt in NBA history?
Yeah.
And the thing about Kai, like, I was nervous when they acquired him because of the thing that concerned me was just all the time he missed for an assortment of reasons. And, you know, it was kind of like Reiner always said this, and it made a lot of sense to me. You don't really know about a guy until you see him every day. And a couple things. One, timing always matters. We started off this show talking about 2011. One of the things that Followell always points out about the 2011 team is it was a bunch of veterans and it was their time and they knew it. Like, the timing for that group of guys to come together in the way that they did, it had a huge impact on them making sacrifices for one another. And I think that the level of superstar that Kyrie is at the place he was in his life when he came here was the perfect superstar for Luka to be paired with, because Kai had gone through some shit. It's all, you know, out there and very public. All the different things he had gone through, and then what happens with the media criticism and the echo chamber and all of that. And so you can be portrayed a certain way that he clearly hasn't been here and did not see himself as that type of person. And people that knew him closely knew he wasn't that type of a person. But again, he couldn't outrun the narrative, and he came to a place that wanted him. I mean, you got to give Nico and J Kidd so much credit for going and getting that guy at the time they did. Nico knowing it could work here because he knew the family and knew the guy, and J Kidd making it work and making Luka, and to that extent, Kyrie, see it. Stein talks about this all the time. One of the toughest things to do in coaching is get stars to buy in. If your stars don't buy in, you're effed. It's over. Doesn't matter the team you've assembled. It's over. And so those guys bought in, and if your two best players are buying in, everyone else gets in line, right? And so the point in time where Kyrie was, what he had experienced in his life, championship pedigree, going through, you know, the media ringer and huge markets, all of that, the type of person he is, how thoughtful he is and what he cares about. And then having a player like Luka that they can have that relationship that's competitive in a good way, not competitive for attention. That's what can drive superstars apart, right? Competing for attention. You haven't felt that once here, right? We've never talked about it once. And I think if they had gotten Kyrie 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it may not play out the way that it did now. So the timing was perfect. And then the other thing that I did not know about Kyrie, you know, just why he was always in the Eastern Conference. So I only saw him, you know, a couple times a year unless I watch national games. But dude, he is so physically strong. I had no idea he could go up in traffic, absorb contact and finish, and rebound physically in traffic with bigger players. I'm not talking about tapping a ball out and chasing it down. I'm talking about going up with bigger players and coming down with the ball. And that is one, incredible hops I did not know he had. And then number two, insanely strong core to be able to absorb those hits and those things and still do something that takes physical strength when you're not grounded on the ground to have leverage. And I did not know he had those things. And so when we started watching him play and it was the end of a game and he needed to turn that stuff on, I was like, holy shit, man, this guy is I knew he was great, but I did not know he could do these things. And so those two guys together, I think, make them a damn near unbeatable offensive team because of the complement of guys they now have around them.
And dude, I just love him as a person. I love how thoughtful he is. I love his answers to questions. I love how in the moment and present he is. And I don't know, man. I just I'm shocked. You're exactly right. You go back to that old saying, that Mike Reiner saying, you don't know a guy till you see him every day or till you're around him. And we've thought that about players in the past. You remember Stackhouse? We talk about Stackhouse a little bit. That was a guy who had a certain reputation, and then to be around him was like, oh my God, he's the greatest guy ever.
He was a demanding guy.
Yeah. But man, to have Luka and Kai together, I mean, this is the glory age. Like we're gonna look back on the Mavericks at some point, and Luka will be retired or whatever, and we'll be looking back on this time. Go, dude, remember when we had Luka and Kyrie together?
Yeah.
And this is it. This is what you're a fan of basketball for your team to go into the season this stacked, this loaded. And then it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about some of the new guys. Let's talk about Klay. Like, how is it that the Mavericks got Klay?
I think had the way that a couple of things. One, I mean, again, timing. Klay clearly didn't want to be in Golden State anymore. So then it's like, where is he going to go? And I think he saw that he can help this team get over the hump. And that says a lot. That guy knows winning. He's got 4 championships. That guy knows winning basketball. And he saw the Mavericks and he said, I can help them win a championship. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of Jason Kidd forcing his way to the Mavericks because he saw Dirk. He's like, I can win a championship with that guy. That was Kidd's last chance for the most part when he was still like going to be a starter, right? That was his final shot. He took everything he had left and he bet it on Dirk. This is Klay's final run. And he had everything that he could. And he said, I bet on Kyrie and Luka. And it doesn't hurt that him and Kyrie are already friends from not only Team USA, but their anti-ties. And again, I want to go back to something. I meant to say this earlier, Ben. A guy that had been in Brooklyn told me last year, he goes, you watch, before the season started. He goes, people can say whatever they want about Kyrie, but I want you to watch the way the players in the league treat him before and after the game. You watch that and you let that determine to you who Kyrie is and how his peers feel about him. Dude, there was one time where we interviewed him after the Golden State game, and it's live, and we had to wait because Steph and I think Klay and Draymond, and Steph and Draymond were in street clothes, were waiting to give Kyrie his props after the game, after they had beat him. They were waiting in line to show Kyrie respect. And so that speaks volumes. And so when you say, how did the Mavericks get Klay? Having Kyrie here with Luka, that's how you finally, after all these years of not getting the guy that you want, and we're all butthurt, and God, it happened again. It's Charlie Brown, and the football gets shanked, and we fall on our nuts and tear it like Tolbert. It finally worked out. The recipe is finally right. Where a Hall of Famer with 4 championships said, I want to go there because that's where I'm going to go win my championship.
So I love Klay for so many reasons. You and I got to interact with him at Dirk's tennis event, and it was so cool to meet him. Like, everything I thought about him, like he kind of seems defensive, or he doesn't mess. Even his body language he carries around is like, I'm about to bust your ass. Like, you just got a chip on his shoulder style.
Right.
And I kind of sensed that interacting with him, but he was sweet as could be, nice as could be. He was great to talk to, but there was a moment where we were telling him about the way that Mavs fans reacted when the news came that he was going to be a Maverick, and he genuinely cared about that. He wanted to hear about that. He wanted to find out what were they saying, what were they thinking. Like, he appreciated that, which I thought that was really human, and I loved seeing that. His love of Dirk is real. He respects the shit out of Dirk. That was awesome.
Yeah.
But I just think about the spacing, and I'm not taking a shot at this guy, but you know I said this all last year. It would drive me crazy when Derrick Jones Jr. would get the ball. Mm-hmm. The defense collapses on who's ever got the rock, Luka or Kai. and then he would be hesitant to shoot a three. Now, he shot the ball really well, better than we ever could have anticipated, and
exceeded my expectations by a mile.
But he never got to the point where he had the confidence to just let it rip, let it fly. And you hurt the entire play. If the whole play develops and you are sitting there with a wide open look, you have to take that shot. Like, it ruins the integrity of the play. To me, if you don't take that shot, then what was all this, we need you to hit that shot so they won't sag off of you so we can do what we want to do inside. And Klay changes that. Now, Tim Hardaway Jr. would have changed that too some, but he lost his shot, fell out of his rhythm, whatever.
Right.
But Klay, you can't leave Klay. And I don't care at what age he is now. If you're guarding Klay Thompson and you decide, I'm going to leave Klay and help Luka and Kai, they're going to hit him right in his shot pocket, and he's going to hit a wide open, uncontested three, and he'll do it. He'll hit 10 of them.
You just tell me how you're going to double team Luka. Like, what is your plan here? What is your plan to double team Luka? You're going to put two guys on Luka, and you're going to let the Mavs go 4-on-3 with Klay Thompson, Derek Lively II, Kyrie Irving, and PJ Washington completely unguarded in the quarter. Like, that's your plan? I think you're probably better off playing man up on Luka. And now Luka's like, it's just different now. If you trap or flood or whatever you do to get the ball out of Luka's hands, he's got 3 legit outlets to move the ball. 3. And PJ Washington might not be covered all year long if they're going to try to take the ball out of Luka's hands. He may not see a defender within 7 feet of him all year long. It's beautiful. Now, again, that's one lineup, right? There's going to be different lineups and stuff, but this is where we saw flashes of it last year with Lively II getting the ball in the middle of the floor and making good decisions. A year of growth of seeing it and him working on his handles. Him at the ball in the middle of the floor on a 4-on-3 half court mini break unguarded. We're going to see some powerful dunks, man. This is going to be really, really good. This is going to be fun offensively.
Okay, so the other thing I want to say about Klay is he strikes me as the type of guy who plays with a chip on his shoulder. And we've talked about Michael Jordan needing to find something to get his juices flowing. What is some reason that I'm mad at this team that I'm going to suddenly decide to show up and play tonight? Klay has to me, my perception of that, and I'm not, look, I wasn't following it super closely, just reading about it. It sounds like he would have loved to have stayed in Golden State. He would have loved to have gotten a big old giant contract like his buddies did, and they didn't give it to him. And so he appears to have taken that personally, and I think he's ready to show them, Golden State, anybody there, hey, I still have plenty left. Watch this. And so I like if it's a guy who is a motivated guy, a chip shoulder guy, and you got a giant chip on his shoulder as fuel for the season. I freaking love that. Now, back to Derek Jones Jr. So, Derek Jones Jr. was supposed to be their whole offseason. He was priority number 1. Nico said it. We're going to keep him.
Right.
He changed agents. He got away, and then they decided to get Najee Marshall. And we can talk about Marshall. But the thing about Derek Jones Jr. is, while it drove me crazy that sometimes he appeared unwilling to let it fly with a wide open 3, he was really good at guarding the number 1 offensive threat, especially the quicker guys on opponents like Shea. Any number of guys. I saw the stat where it's like, hey, who guarded the number 1 scoring threat on each team, and he led the league in whatever percentage that was. Correct. He was an absolute beast for them defensively. So to lose that is scary. And then in my mind, I go, wait a second. So they lost that, and they're replaced him with Klay, and Klay may not want to come off the court. So does that mean Klay is going to have to do more defensively? And then you get caught up like, no, Najee's replacing Derek, but yeah, Klay's also going to start and be out there a lot. So how does this work? Let's use this as a way to get into Najee, and let's talk about it in conjunction with Derek Jones Jr. How do they replace what they lost with Derek Jones Jr. on the defensive end?
Well, they're going to have to give up offense and have one of those guys off the floor, or they're going to have to play small it puts an enormous amount of pressure on PJ Washington Jr. to play really well because, he might, if they decide they definitely need those 3 offensive players on the floor, he might get replaced by Najee, for example, who, by the way, is a better offensive player than I realized.
Really?
Just watching a little bit, but I got to go to practice, and he's just the things that he was doing. I think, do you remember last year when I went to practice and I walked in to the radio show and I said, dude, Derrick Jones Jr. is going to start this year.
Yes.
Okay. That's because I was watching practice and I was watching what he was doing. I was like, he's going to start. And I don't think Najee Marshall is going to start, but what I saw in practice made me think they expect a lot out of him and he's going to play quite a bit. Now, I will say the practice I saw, PJ was out of that practice, so that could have a little bit of impact. But that's where Jason Kidd has decisions to make, and that's where it's going to be matchup based. And I also think because Luka and Kyrie don't have to carry as big of an offensive load because of what they have around them, I think they're going to be able to sell out a little bit more on defense. There was moments in the playoffs when Luka, who was beat up, would get criticized and he'd hear it, and then you would see his defense go up a notch or two. And it's like, can you do that every night? Can you sustain that and be the offensive guy? It's just a matter of picking and choosing your spots. And so in order for them to have the ideal offensive lineup out on the floor at the end of games, then those guys are going to have to sell out on defense a little bit more than maybe normally they would if they had Derrick out on the floor, right? Kyrie, I think, is going to find himself in some tougher defensive matchups. Like, if you have the lineup I'm talking about out on the floor at the end of a game against Oklahoma City, I honestly think Kyrie would be on Shea before Klay would. Now, I could be wrong about that, but it's just the way it goes. If you want, do you know who became a better defensive player because he had to? Steph Curry. So, it's a matchup driven game. And if you want your best offensive players out on the floor, they're going to have to sell out a little bit on defense as well. Klay is going to be an adequate defender. I fully expect that, but he's 34, 35 now. He's had 2 major surgeries. So to expect him to be the elite defender he was when he was 29 and 30, that's an unrealistic expectation, but he can still be an adequate to above average system defender for the team. I do believe that.
But the Najee acquisition, they had not lost technically Derrick Jones Jr. yet, right? Because he hadn't signed with his new, like they still could have said, no, we're going to figure this out. But then they said, no, we're good. Let's get Najee, right?
They didn't want to fiddle fart around. So what happened was there was uncertainty with Derrick. And because he changed his agent and they didn't know how it was going to go. And so they said, you know what? Fuck this. And they went and got a player that they liked a lot. And so it's not, Najee is a different style defender than Derrick was. He's really, really good defender, plus defender. I think he's going to have a great impact in that regard, but he's a different style than Derrick is. And also Derrick was far and away the most ridiculous athlete on their team. So they got a little bit less athletic by replacing Derrick with Klay. Now they got better skill wise. And then you look at Najee. I think like when it really comes down to, they have to lock down on a badass perimeter player. I think the guy who's going to get the first crack at that is Quentin. So we'll see how that plays out. Quentin Grimes, but yeah, they don't have a defender like Derrick Jones Jr., but they got better. They're a better overall basketball team for sure.
So I think let's talk about Quentin Grimes, because in my mind I pair him up with Josh Green. You lost Josh Green, but you added Quentin Grimes. And
yeah, that's fair.
There's a lot I've read about him where, people are like, man, you don't understand. Like, he's a really good player. He's a good defender, good offensive player. Mm-hmm. And he might be better than I'm expecting, or than a lot of people are expecting. But just compared to Josh Green brought a ton of energy and athleticism, and really developed into a nice shooter. His shot got, he developed that. It got really, really nice. But right. He would bring a lot of energy. There were things he did that drove me crazy, like jumping up before you know where you're going to pass it or what you're going to do with the ball. And usually it worked out for him, though. But I wonder about that. To me, that's a mystery because I don't know how that trade-off is going to go. How do you think if you just are saying, okay, you lose Josh Green, but you add Quentin Grimes, how does that math equation work for you based on what you've seen?
So it's unfair because I have seen Josh Green play every NBA game he's ever played. And Quentin Grimes was in the East, and last year was a washout for him. After he got traded he'd had injuries before that, and then I don't even think he played more than a handful of games for Detroit after the trade. So last year was a washout. I did talk to a front office person that said that without hesitation, Quentin Grimes is better than Josh Green. Like it's a person's opinion, but they were like, no, dude, Quentin Grimes is better than Josh Green. And it's like, okay, well, Josh Green already got his second contract. Quentin Grimes is still on his rookie contract, trying to figure out where he was. Last year was a washout, but he was a part of, the Knicks were ecstatic to have him before they made the trade to send him to Detroit. And he was getting time. And, he was a big time player. I think he went to Kansas first out of high school and then went back to University of Houston. So it's not like he's got a pedigree. He's first round pick. So it's not like crazy talk. But talking about Derrick Jones Jr. being the best athlete, their second best athlete was Josh Green, right? So you're talking about there's trade-offs, but the trade-offs for what you lost in athleticism, you picked up more in skill and the way that this team specifically will use those skills. So you took a step back in one area, but you took a step forward in another area. And I think the other thing that was different last year is they just didn't have the options off the bench when a guy wasn't going. They got a lot of options when a guy's not going. A lot of different lineups that they can use. I mean, that's because those first three guys are so offensive minded. When I look at the minutes to divvy up between Najee and Quentin and Spencer and Hardy and Omax and those guys, I have a feeling defense is going to win the day when you're trying to figure out which one of those guys you want to turn to and mix and match.
So let's talk about Dinwiddie, the last of the new guys we're going to talk about. I love that he's back. I don't have an expectation that he'll be the player he was when he was last here. He hasn't been that player since he left, but I love that he's coming back. I love that he wants to be here. I love that he knows how to play with these guys. And I really see him as a guy, like my biggest concern, like I said, is that Luka and Kyrie are fresh for the postseason.
Right.
I see Spencer as a guy who can run the offense and fill in for one of those two guys on any given night or in any game. He's not Luka, he's not Kai, but he can run an offense and he can be a facilitator. He can create things himself off the dribble. I'd love that he's here. I just think it's a good veteran presence, another guy who can make things happen and kind of be an all-purpose fill-in for Luka and Kai.
I think that's one of the most interesting storylines is how are they using this guy? Because remember that he could have come here at the end of last year when he was free and there was all that controversy. And I think you'll remember at the time I was like, dude, I don't know why he would come here. He's not going to play here. Like, this team is different than when he was here. He's not going to get consistent minutes here. And I think he went to the Lakers because not only could he get consistent minutes, but also have a direct impact on a team fighting to get into the playoffs, right? I don't know how this plays out, and I haven't talked to anybody on the staff to get an answer on this, so I'm totally speculating here. I would equate Spencer Dinwiddie to a really good middle relief pitcher, where you might not see him for 4 or 5 games and suddenly he's out there eating 4 innings for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that plays out with rhythm. He's been around forever. He's friends with a bunch of guys here. I know he's friends with Kyrie, for example. He's also a really smart guy. Like, he's very smart. And so I think he can, all these guys have egos. There's no way you can be in the league and be free of ego. I mean, that's not real. So I don't know how they plan on using him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that only gets a couple minutes here and there for 4 or 5 games. And then suddenly he starts because Kyrie's not playing and gets 34 nights or 34 minutes, like, I think that scenario is possible. I'm speculating. I have not been told that, but it's a little bit different now with the players they have and going, oh, yeah, he's your backup point guard with this many minutes tonight. Man, there's games where they don't, quote unquote, use a backup point guard, you know?
All right, want to get into guys that have the potential to make a big leap. We also have a special guest who's going to join us momentarily, so stay tuned for that. But guys that could make a big leap, and Derek Lively II, oh my God. There was that highlight of him in one of the preseason games where he floored how many preseason games have they even played?
Well, I mean, it's like we've gone through 4 preseason games total.
Okay.
But you're talking about preseason game 1 against the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, my God. He floored the ball and took it almost he did take it coast to coast, but he took it almost the full distance of the court, and he was switching hands, and he was spinning, and he was finishing at the bucket, and he looks like he put on some muscle weight, and I'm looking at this going, man, I kind of felt like he overachieved so much last year that it would almost be unfair to have any higher expectation. Like, even if he just played the same as he did last year, that would be more than enough because he was phenomenal last year. So that said, how much of a leap can Derek Lively II even take?
Oh, I think he can take an astronomical leap because he's so talented. And I wouldn't say that, he exceeded expectations or anything like that, because I think what he did was he played his role. Like, he might have exceeded our mental expectations that we would have on any rookie. But I think what we saw play out, which we had been told going into the year, and then we saw it play out, he's a person of tremendous character. Like, tremendous character. And so, like, when those Tyson Chandler comparisons, when we drafted him, came out, you're like, okay, dude, you're talking about a superhero, man. Be careful making that comparison. But I think people also saw the character comparisons. And then we saw it play out. He went through some terrible stuff last year and did not let it impact what he did on the floor. So I think he exceeded mental expectations that you would have on any 19-year-old kid. But I don't think he did anything outside of his game last year. And I think that's what's really exciting is how that game can grow. And that specific play in preseason you're referencing as an example, taking the ball immediately, going 50 feet with it, crossing up, getting to a spot, like using your dribble to get to a spot to then finish. That's a huge step. And that's just scratching the surface and showing, man, there's a lot of potential in this man's game. And dude, hitting a 3-point shot in the finals. I can't remember if it was ever, I know Follow was like, is he the first player to ever hit his first NBA 3-pointer in a finals game? I can't remember if it was true or not.
Right.
But it just goes to show you, that'll be a part of his game. But even before shooting outside shots and knocking it down, the most important thing is what happens when he gets the ball triple threat after he pivots in the middle of the floor after a trap. And that's going to be so critical to his offensive game.
Okay. How about Jaden Hardy? Is there room for him to make a big leap this year?
There absolutely is. And I expect it to happen because I think last year, one of the things that held him back is he tried to be something that he wasn't. He's a bucket getter. Like, dude, go be a bucket getter. And you can tell when he's trying to play make. And the comparison I would make is don't try to play make. Do it the way Monte Ellis did. Monte Ellis was a bucket getter. Now, Monte would get 4.5 assists a game, and the way that he got him was because the defense collapsed and he made the right decision. He didn't turn a corner going, I got to get my man a shot. Always attack the rim, always try to score, and then when the defense puts you in a position where someone's open, read it right. But don't have the mentality of I'm going to get other guys involved. That's not who he is. He's a bucket getter. And I think what he did in the playoffs last year, I think shows you that he overcame that. He's going into year 3. He's on a 2nd round rookie contract. He wants to get he wants to get paid. And I think if he delivers from the jump, it's going to be hard to take him out of games because him getting you points means fewer minutes for Kyrie and Luka and that whole ripple effect that we're talking about.
I want him to spend as much time as possible with Kai. Seems like they have good chemistry together because I would love him to learn some of the ways of Kai. That would be magical. But I think this is an important year in his development because I think he needs to take that next step. And being a professional bucket getter is it's a good gig, and not a lot of guys can do it. Just come in and get you instant points.
Go be Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford or one of those style of guys, man.
Yeah, no, he can fill it up, come in, and you need that at times. And then finally, a guy who can he make a big leap is a guy I've been excited about, but I feel like he's kind of getting lost in the sauce because of all the depth now, and that's Omax Prosper. I mean, does he see a lot of court time this year?
It's going to be difficult for him to get time, but he can do something that not a lot of other guys on this team can do. And I think, honestly, where he could really go get minutes is go get some of Maxi's minutes. And I think he's easily can play 4. And, he plays with, sometimes you say reckless abandon and you mean it in a negative way. I don't mean it in a negative way with him. He is nonstop going after every ball at all times, and that can change the dynamic of a game in really positive ways. If he hits his outside shot with any regularity, and I'm talking 28%, like let's just go on the Dorian Finney-Smith trajectory. Dorian became a very competent shooter for the Mavericks. Go back in time. They had to rebuild his shot. So it didn't happen overnight. But if he's a guy that can hit, 27 to 28% of his threes and do all those other things that he does, he's very, very valuable for this team. I would love for him to earn some minutes.
And then, we talked about Luka and Kai. We talked about the new guys. And then we've talked about some guys that could take a leap. And one of the guys that hasn't really fit into any of those categories that we haven't talked about, we talked about Gafford a little bit. We talked about Maxey a little bit. But is PJ Washington, and I feel like he's still young enough that he could take a significant leap. And you talked about earlier, how does a team go about stopping the Mavericks? If PJ Washington is camped out in the corner and somebody's worried about leaving Klay, but then somebody else is like, I got to help because Kai and Luka just get to the bucket whenever they want to. PJ may be a guy that has more wide open threes than he could ever have imagined. And so he's a massively important thing to this, a part of this equation on both sides of the ball. But losing Derrick Jones Jr. and not having Najee be in the starting lineup because you're assuming Klay is going to be in the starting lineup and maybe at the end of games too, PJ then arguably becomes your best defender. And I'm not talking about not including Derek Lively II. But PJ's defense is massively important, his grit, his toughness, all of those things. And so I am curious about him. He's still young enough to ask the question, can PJ Washington Jr. take a leap this year?
He can take a leap, but he's going to have to take a leap within the concept of what the team needs. He's going to need to be, in order to win a championship, a lot of guys have to make sacrifices, and he's going to be one of those guys that has to make a sacrifice, which is really hard for a 26-year-old. But I think there'll be times where they put him as the screener in the pick and roll to keep him engaged and not just have him over there in the corner because he is talented. They need to keep him engaged. He needs to get his 3-point percentage up. I can't remember off the top of my head. Like after the trade, it was in the mid to low 30s. Heck, it might have even been 31 to 32%. That's got to go up. But they do need to keep him engaged. You can't just, he's not Dorian. He's more talented than Dorian. So that's going to be part of the trick of this, keeping him in the mix, keeping him engaged, and him, making the sacrifice and knowing it's not about me and my numbers. He's got to be the Robert Horry of this thing if you want to go win some championships. And it'd be great if he was 3 years older. He would totally get it. He may totally get it. He's been in such a crappy basketball environment in Charlotte and loved, you come here, you've never played in a playoff game, and you go to the finals in front of your hometown, right? So I think he loves being here. He's going to have to make sacrifices. But yes, he's got the potential to really make some leaps and bounds in a lot of different areas.
Okay, very nice. Well, we've done the expectations for Luka and Kai. Let's talk about the new guys. We've talked about the guys who could take a big leap. And now we're going to bring on a very special guest. He's one of my favorite people when it comes to Dallas Mavericks media content. His name is Slightly Biased, and he's joining us now. Look at this.
Wow. Yes. Me on, guys.
What is up, dude?
The murderer's row right here.
Love it. Love it. How you doing?
What is that jersey?
Some Nike jersey? I don't know. Just thought it looked cool.
You know, for the record, I did ask you to come play pickup basketball, and you said, I've got to run some errands.
That is true, yes. But I did ask you to play pickup basketball as well.
I should have hit
also
you.
said no.
I should have hit you with the errands. I should have hit you with that.
You didn't hit him up with a, I've got to go return some videotapes?
Yeah, I got to go return some videotapes. Exactly. Okay. Slightly, by the way, dude, I love your work. You are phenomenal at what you do. And one of the coolest things last year was when what was the thing that caught on that you did with was it Luka and sunglasses? What was that?
That was during the playoffs. It was getting everybody to change their avatar.
Oh, yeah. That was the old LeBron meme from 2016. The players come back down 3-1 in the finals.
Yes.
And it wasn't me, but someone photoshopped Luka's face onto it, and I just changed my Twitter profile to that.
But how crazy was that when you saw like hundreds of thousands of people change their profile pic? That was pretty badass. Yeah,
it was pretty funny. I mean, I got some news station called me and I did an interview. They didn't use a single quote I said. I hit up my family. I was like, hey, I might be on the news tonight.
Were you wearing those glasses you're wearing now in that news piece?
No, it was a phone interview.
Yeah, but you still could have been wearing those.
It's true. I was outside at the time. I remember, so I probably was wearing something.
Do you sleep in sunglasses?
Yeah.
Badass.
Hey, dude, Skin,
my face.
I will tell you, I do know somebody who has played basketball with Slightly Biased.
Is that right?
And I got a really good scouting report. Really good.
I think I know who it is.
He's a big boy. He's a good-sized human.
He is a big boy. They said he could fill it up. He did it all well. He could rebound. He could pass, play a little defense. He could shoot a little bit. He kind of brought everything to the table, which is what I wanted to hear. You know, they say don't meet your heroes. You may not ever want to see your favorite basketball analyst play basketball, but from what I hear, it matches the media content.
I try my best. I don't know if it's good, but I put forth max effort.
So the sheets match the pillowcases. Nice.
Okay. So Slightly, we have asked you to put together something for us. The top 5 reasons that the Mavericks will make the finals this year, and then the top 5 reasons that they won't reach the finals this year. What do you want to start with?
Should we just do 1 and 1?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah,
not get too high, not get too low.
Yeah.
All right, my number 1 reason, they're both tied together for the will and won't. One, they have Luka Doncic, who I think is the best player in the league. I thought last year had an MVP season. I think this will be the year of Luka. MVP-wise, I think the Mavs will win enough games, which has always sort of been the biggest factor there in him not winning one yet. But I think this will be the year where the regular season win total finally reaches the point where people really consider you for MVP, and he'll just be doing Luka things. And when you have a guy like that on your basketball team, you know, especially a guy who's proven it in the playoffs already at like 25, 26 years old, that he can turn it on to a completely total different level. You can win any series, and that's why they're never out of any playoff series. That's why they've won 5 series in his career so far, and they were the betting favorites in one of them entering those series. So anytime that guy is on your basketball team, you have a very good chance of doing special things. And then that leads to my number 1 reason they won't. And if we're talking just a return to the finals, I don't think Luka can be the shape that he was in. And by shape, I mean like health-wise. I don't think he can be dealing with that knee injury that he had in the postseason. And you can realistically expect them to have the magical run they did last year. Like, it's just not that sustainable. You know, anybody who watched him, and this became something that non-Mavs fans sort of critiqued him over this. Oh, of course he was hurt. Of course. Anyone who watched him play basketball last year knew he was, I mean, like 50 to 60% in the postseason. Like, it was well below what we came to expect out of him physically. And last year in the playoffs, 28 points per game. That's a good number, but for Luka, that was a career low. And I think some of that, though, was having Kyrie and him not having to do as much. 32% from 3 in the playoffs. That's the career low for him. 55% true shooting in the playoffs, career low for him. So he'll need to be healthy in the postseason.
I remember going into game 2 of the Clippers series and talking to people earlier in the day, and I didn't think he was going to play that night. Like, that's how hurt he was. And I think, when I look back to last year and the run they went on, the fact that they got to the finals with him being as beat up as he was is extraordinary. And the front office, what their number one goal this offseason was to put the team in a position where they can be as healthy as they can possibly be in mid-April. That's what building the team was about, because of exactly what you're talking about. You don't win a championship if your best player is compromised. You just don't.
Right.
You can be 80%, can't be 60 or 55 or whatever it was. And, there were times where you didn't even notice, and then other times where you did notice. But if the Mavericks are going to win a championship, he's got to be close to really healthy at the beginning of the run. It's a long, grueling run. And I think if you look back at how long their season was last year, starting in Abu Dhabi and then going to Spain and then him playing all those minutes and then playing all the way into June, I think looking back at all the mileage over the course of the last year absolutely could be a factor in this year.
But I love that you're number one, because Luka is Jordan, he's Kobe, he's LeBron in his prime. You have the best player on the planet who's an unstoppable force, and you got a great team around him that's built, to complement all the things he does. That's exactly what we should be talking about going into the season. You have Luka, so you have a chance to go to the finals. Totally agree.
Yeah, and that's why, even though it was the right decision organization-wise to tank those last couple of games a couple years ago, the idea was still, well, even if your team has been bad for the last 3 months, if you make it to the play-in or if you make it to the playoffs with Luka and Kyrie, obviously, then realistically anything is possible. But I was on Team Tank, though, so I think they did the right thing. All right, my next two things are tied together again. So expanding more on Luka and Kyrie together already, their synergy was incredible last year. They're already such a hard duo to stop. But with the new additions the team has made, and with I'll save this next one for later, but with the new additions the team has made, it's hard to imagine this offense, as long as those two are healthy, not being top 5, maybe even top 1 in the entire league. Like they're going to be absolutely lethal. The shooting and floor spacing that they went and got in the offseason, combined with those two, the amount of gravity that they have, the amount of attention that they draw. We talk about Luka getting double teamed all the time, but that Thunder series, Kyrie was seeing double teams every time he touched the basketball pretty much. And you look at his scoring numbers in that series and it was low, but if you just go back and watch, it was because he was attracting so much attention because the Thunder just weren't that comfortable with their perimeter defenders on him versus Dort on like a sort of banged up Luka. So that's one of the reasons why I think that they have a chance to go back to the finals is that duo. And then a reason they won't is if I do kind of worry about the depth. The depth is a strength, but I do think there's a world where, we're just kind of penciling in some of these new additions and some of these depth guys as being really good, additions and stuff like that. The reality is Spencer Dinwiddie, who I heard you guys were talking about before, and I agree 100% with what you said, Skin. I don't think he's someone who's going to be seeing the floor for 20 minutes a game. I don't think he's going to have like you're on the court every single game type of role. Like that would be a little bit surprising to me. But the reality is if people don't follow the league that much, he hasn't been that great of a basketball player since he left the Mavericks. Like that's just the truth.
Absolutely.
He really struggled with the Lakers, really struggled with the Nets. I mean, it's just kind of been kind of poor for him since then. Omax, we're waiting and seeing. Hardy, we're still kind of waiting and seeing. There's some flashes there, but even guys like Quentin Grimes, he hasn't been good really in 2 years. And last year I'm willing to write off because it was a really weird year. He got hurt. He got traded.
He was hurt all year.
Hurt all year, was in like weird, didn't really fit into the Knicks rotation anymore. And I remember seeing reports. It got like kind of weird there. Then he gets traded to the Pistons, who were terrible, and he barely played there. Only played in 51 games. Najee Marshall, 38% from 3 last year. That's awesome. We're kind of penciling that in. But the 3 years before that, 34% his rookie year, then 20%, then 30%. So we're hoping that that's true, that Najee Marshall shooting jump he saw last year is like who he is now, which is 100% possible. And he'll be getting, passes from Luka and Kyrie, who will be the 2 best playmakers he's played with easily. But I sometimes their depth can worry me, but that's assuming there's injuries, which can happen to anyone.
The way you started that, it almost made me think you're making it up as you went along. But then when I saw what you were saying, I realized why you presented it that way. You were hesitant to say that their depth was a problem because it could be an absolute strength.
Right.
I'm opposite of you on this. Now, I will say this, like the difference in starters and bench players is usually consistency. And where teams really get in trouble, like with the Mavericks, Hardaway Jr. had really high highs and really low lows. And when he would go into his low lows, the Mavericks didn't have enough other depth to withstand it. And so then it was like the weight of the world was everyone was like, man, Tim Hardaway Jr. sucks. And all that routine where it's like on a good team with a lot of depth, when a guy's going through it, all right, we're going to take you out of the lineup for a while. And the Mavericks thought they had to have Hardaway Jr. I think I said that going into the playoffs, didn't I, Ben? If the Mavericks are going to go on a long run, Hardaway Jr. has to be a part of it. Right. And he absolutely wasn't, and they went to the finals. But I think that's what happens when you have a lot of guys that can step up at different times. And I look at it as I think the competition for minutes after that starting lineup is absolutely insane. Like there's a lot of quality players that are going to fight like hell to get minutes. And I suspect it's going to go to the defensive minded guys. Man,
and to that end, you look at going into last year, wasn't Derek Jones Jr. the last player the Mavs added?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
by the way, we haven't even mentioned Dante Exum because he's got the wrist injury. Dude, go back and watch the final month of the regular season. He was one of their 4 best players.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not even talking about him in this minutes battle because he's hurt right now.
So I love both sides of this slightly. I think it's both great points because I've got my Mavs pajamas on and I'm like, okay, Najee's going to shoot 38% forever, maybe 40 this year. Quentin Grimes, he had that setback, but he is going to be incredible. And Dinwiddie's going to be who he was last time he was here. It's easy to get drunk on the Kool-Aid and think that way. But at the same time, look, the front office has made some great moves and they pulled Derek Jones Jr. out of their buttholes. Like who in the world thought he was going to be a starter going into last season and such a massively important guy? And the other thing that I look at here, when I look at Klay Thompson versus Tim Hardaway Jr., give me Klay Thompson every single time forever. So I love that. And then Najee, it's the people who have been able to see him and the people that have seen him play more regularly when I hear them talking about, because to me, it's a mystery. I didn't watch their games. So I'm hoping that he's going to be really good, but I would kind of lean towards, okay, they've got a track record of picking the right guys. I would believe these guys are going to hit more than they're going to miss. It might just be Mavs homerism, but I'm going to choose to go that direction. Just too many things pointing on the right side of that to me.
Yeah, in full disclosure, my won'ts are more so me playing devil's advocate. Like I'm not saying I think them. Yeah. But
hey, we put you in a tough position. We asked you to come up with 5 reasons why they're not going to make the finals. So
yeah.
Don't you feel bad?
Even think about the names we just mentioned. Like if any one of those guys don't pan out, it's really not the end of the world at all for this team. Like this isn't like last year or 2 years ago where it's like Christian Wood has to be good. And you were just really banking on that. Or like Grant Williams has to do X, Y, and Z.
God, dude. That's a great point, man. We are not far removed from, oh my God, Christian Wood has to be dominant.
Dude, I think about the life cycle of any team in any sport. We are in, what is this? We're in October of 2024. I would like to take you to mid-June of 2023. And go look at that roster and compare it to this roster.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It is insane. And not only do that, go look at the assets that the Mavericks had to get better in June of 2023 and compare that roster, whatever that was, 16 months ago, to this roster now. It's unbelievable.
I mean, it's really a testament to Nico Harrison and really a testament to Derek Lively because that pick was a home run. And this is another... This ties me into one of my other wills. They will make the finals again. Derek Lively, I talked about it on Locked On a million times. I talked about it on my own last year. Just watching him play, like what he did last year was kind of when they drafted him. If that ended up being his career, I would have been totally cool with. Like, it would have been a winning draft pick for me if last year was who Derek Lively was in year 4.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't supposed to happen like that as a rookie, as a 19-year-old rookie. And it's just made me think we have to completely and totally rethink what his ceiling is as a player, who he's going to develop into, toss everything you thought going into the draft that he'll just be this solid rim running big who can kind of anchor a defense, maybe Tyson Chandler, and turn it into, I have no idea what Derek Lively can be moving forward. If you were to come back in time 10 years from now and tell me he was an all-star, a 6-time all-star, I would say, okay. I mean, I could see a scenario where that happens. So can Derek Lively take a leap forward and sort of solidify himself as a top 10 center this year? I think it's possible. You might think that sounds disrespectful, but then you look at the centers and it's Jokic, Embiid, Bam, AD, Wemby, Sabonis, Gobert, Chet, Cat. Like, that's a tough group to crack right there. And if Derek Lively beats out any of those guys, that will be incredible for this Mavericks team. But then the other centers, you look at KP, who's going to miss most of the season, or at least the first couple months of the season, is dealing with injuries already.
Yeah.
Nurkic, who had a really good year last year, but I think I'd rather take Lively than him right now. Hartenstein just got $30 million. He's pretty good, but I don't know. Do you go with the young center and Lively, Şengün, Jared Allen? Like, can Lively beat those guys out? And if he can, this is going to be such a good basketball team with him anchoring the defense and just being this monster pick and roll threat with Luka, who gets the ball in the middle of the floor and knows exactly what to do with it every single time. And it's impossible to play defense against it, because then you have shooters in the corner as well. Like, it's just a nightmare to think about.
Yeah, I want to say something about what you're saying, though, because I think it ties into, like, you're talking about Najee Marshall's percentages. You don't think it's any coincidence that Derek Jones Jr. has far and away his greatest offensive year ever by a million miles, and Derek Lively II as a rookie, we're talking about him exceeding expectations? We're not. We're talking about guys going out and playing roles because they're on the floor with fucking Kyrie and Luka. Like, that's what this game is. Mm-hmm. If you have 2 of the 12 or 13 best offensive players on the fucking planet, go do your job and do it with commitment and know your role. And those guys had incredible athletic talent. So I think it's like, in the moment, you're like, holy shit, this is working out well. But I think when you step back, there's a reason that rookie played the way he did. There's a reason that Gafford got here and was immediately like, oh shit, yeah, this guy is worth the money that Washington gave him and then gave up on him. And Derek, we got to keep Derek Jones Jr. And so what I'm saying is, those other guys, it's that situation. Oh yeah, but now you're also out there with Klay. Like, everyone's spending all this time talking about the spacing that Klay affords Kyrie and Luka. Dude, it's the spacing that he affords PJ and Derek and whoever's on the floor with him. Think about this. Klay in Golden State's prime, now outside of the Kevin Durant years, okay, that's obnoxious. But when KD wasn't there, Klay was their second best offensive player, right? And we've never thought about him as being anything other than catch and shoot or running off screens or, pin downs and wheels and things like that. On this team, he's got 2 Steph Currys. He's on the team with 2 Steph Currys waiting for the ball. So think about those other 2 guys. So all I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if Najee Marshall hits 38% of his threes this year. He ain't going to be covered. It's like, unless, something gets in your head, right? Which can happen. It can happen to the best of them. It can happen to great players. The opportunities that these guys have are endless offensively.
So I want to go back to something you were saying slightly, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, if Lively was just what he was last year, I would be, if his whole career was that season times 10, cut and paste, I'd be like, what a badass. Maybe one of the greatest centers in the history of the Mavericks, if not the best center ever, just based on that, if he could do that for a decade. But I am wondering now, after seeing him bulk up, after seeing him floor the rock, after seeing him hit that 3 in the finals, and it looked pure, it looked gorgeous. What is a potential, like, what is, and I don't want to put any pressure on a young guy, but like, pie in the sky, what could he even be? If he maxes out and crushes that glass ceiling Do you guys, I'll start with you slightly, do you guys even have any players in mind that Derek Lively II could ultimately be?
So there was a Twitter thread that was going around recently where someone was saying he could, like Giannis, he could see some flashes of Giannis. I think that's just setting yourself up for a disappointment there if you think Giannis is in the cards. But I think his offensive scoring game kind of resembles Jared Allen's in some ways, where Jared Allen, a little bit shorter than Lively, but came into the league with sort of similar-ish skill sets, very athletic, with the touch around the rim kind of being a question mark for Jared Allen entering the league, and over time has sort of developed a pretty reliable post game and some, a solid jump hook and stuff like that. Those are the things that, if Lively were to really develop, and he himself has said that the post game is something that he's really wanting to work on. Those are the things that I think could really help this Mavericks team. Istok said it really well on Twitter, where that clip in the preseason of him doing a Euro step in transition is the most exciting for the future. But the clip of him just posting up Marcus Smart and hitting an easy hook shot is the most exciting for the Mavericks this upcoming season. I think that Jared Allen, to me, Jared Allen was a name I came back to with maybe a little bit more playmaking upside, because I don't know if you can really count on that three ball getting there. Although it would be really, really nice. It would just be a nice luxury. But I think the impact of a Bam or something like that, where the stats might not completely jump out at you or grip you. And I'm not saying their play style's the same, but their stats don't jump out the page. But if you watch them, their fingerprint on the game is just undeniable. They just control everything on defense, and the offense just runs smoother when those guys are out on the court.
I think think about the guys that you named and how different all of their games are. And I don't think you said anything outrageous by any stretch of the imagination. I hadn't been thinking of Bam until the end there, because he's so much longer than Bam, but Bam plays bigger than he is, right? I mean, yeah. I'm a huge fan of him. I think he's a phenomenal player. Well, get in line. But I think it kind of speaks to how much the game has changed and how unique and long Derek Lively II is. He's very long, he's very athletic, and he moves very, very well. For example, the other day I was talking to Harp, and I was like, well, the Mavericks lost their best athlete in Derek Jones Jr. And Harp was like, really? Because I thought Lively was their best athlete. And so think about, even if he's not being in the conversation, think about what that says about his upside for how big he is. So you're talking about Jared Allen. Jared Allen's a really good player, but as soon as you say it, my immediate reaction is, oh, he's way more athletic than Jared Allen is. But it's not what you said is, I think, on point. I don't think it's he's way off here. I don't think that at all. And so that's when people start saying this crazy shit that they're saying about Giannis. But the reason they're saying it is because of the size and the athleticism lends to this idea that the sky is the limit, right?
Yeah.
And so you were even talking about, okay, what if his 3-point shot never comes around? Hell, Giannis's 3-point shot still ain't here yet, right? Yeah, I mean, he takes them, but anytime he takes them, you're like, he let us off the hook. Yes.
Yeah.
But dude, that shot looked good too. And we'd seen him shoot it. We'd seen him shoot in practice. I mean, it was buttery.
Yeah. And shooting in practice it's fine. It's like, what are they going to do in a game when a guy closes out? What is your comfort level? It's really, what is your comfort level taking the shot? That matters more than anything. You shot it a million times. What is your comfort level doing it in a game? And again, he took a shot in the finals. That wasn't, the context is different. But the whole point being is there is all of that potential there. It's enormous.
Okay, so they like to they like to do the pick and roll at the top and then spread out. It'll be PJ in the corner, but if Lively can hit that shot, could he be over in the corner and then PJ is the one at the free throw line?
Absolutely. You will see, and I think just as a matter of giving the defense different looks and also keeping PJ engaged, there will be times where PJ will be your high screen setter, because then if Derek can hit that corner three, then there's no rim protection on that middle action. It changes everything.
If Derek Lively really could start hitting corner threes, I mean, it's just the offense is going to be so good, man.
Yes,
but no, I do agree. I thought, I was just rewatching a bunch of Derek Lively stuff, and I thought, I don't think it's because I said the Jared Allen thing, and some people got upset by it. the ceiling was solid. Jared Allen was an all-star, man. He's a really,
he's
really
a great
good basketball
player.
Yeah.
I wanted before the year before we got Daniel Gafford, I was like, can we add Jared Allen when there was all that trade talk? He's a really good player, dude.
Yeah. So I was saying that as like a compliment. I was more saying, Giannis has averaged 30 points per game each of the last 2 seasons. So you're talking about one of the greatest players ever. If you think that's right. If you think that's a leap you could take. And I'm so high on Derek Lively. I think he's absolutely incredible. So I
expect Lively to be MVP. I mean, all right. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, why? Like the Mavericks don't even need him to be good.
Right.
So that's kind of. So I'm really excited to see Lively. So that's one of my. They will make the finals again. Is his development. Another one of my won'ts. I mean, this is kind of a cop out, but I feel like you have to talk about it every time you talk about something like this in this conference. Is that the West is just a bloodbath, and it's going to be a bloodbath again. And some teams have taken step backs. Like the Clippers probably will not be a playoff team this season, so you can sort of scratch them off. But the Grizzlies are back, and they were a 2 seed each of the 2 years before John Morant pretty much missed the entire season. So they'll be back. They'll be good. The Nuggets will still be good. I think they'll take a step back, but you don't want to see Jokic in the playoffs. The Thunder are going to be, the Thunder are going to be disgustingly good this season. So they're going to be. I think the Suns are a little overlooked. The Timberwolves, that trade, I at the moment, the Cat trade, I thought was a head scratcher for the Timberwolves. After seeing more Dante DiVincenzo, granted, it's just the preseason, but man, he is so good. And him spacing the floor in the backcourt next to Ant is pretty shocking. So,
dude, did you see all that jawing too?
I did, yes.
Jawing to the bench? Dude, I love that. He's always
been a dog. Yeah. So he kind of fits everything they're doing almost perfectly.
Let me tell you guys a quick Dante DiVincenzo story. I'm not going to out the player. So it was the night after Villanova won the national championship, and I believe Dante was MVP of the Final Four. I think he was. And anyways, he just had an incredible rise, and so he was not being discussed as a first-round pick the middle of that year, but then he had such an incredible tournament, he was then being discussed as a first-round pick. It is the night after Villanova won the national championship. We are playing another team, and I am standing with an NBA front office guy, and we're looking at the layup line, and we're talking about DiVincenzo. And I said, man, do you think he could be like that guy? Is that the kind of NBA player he was? And I was pointing to a player. And he said, oh, yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison. And so I'm standing there by the layup line, and suddenly I'm standing next to that guy I just pointed at. And I go, hey, man, I was just talking to a guy over here, and we were talking about DiVincenzo being a guy that, could end up being like you. And he goes, oh, man, thank you.
Wow.
I was like, what the fuck? You're already in the league, dude. Like, I don't understand what you just said to me. Like, I thought you might be offended by that. Like, you're already in the league. You don't have to prove anything. Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that will always stay with me. And I love DiVincenzo, but the number one thing that I think that trade does is I think it puts Anthony Edwards on a different plane. Like, if he is going to be Michael or Kobe or whatever that is, which is not fair to say, but I think he has the potential to be that. I think getting Cat out of the way opens the doors for that to happen.
Yeah. And there was some financial stuff too, but I do think a lot of it is starting to make more sense of just a backcourt mate in DiVincenzo who doesn't need the ball in his hands, can space the floor just as well as Cat. Granted, it's a different position, but because he bombed 9 threes a game last year. Like, that's volume shooting is, I think, an overlooked ability of just throwing threes up there. It's why Tim Hardaway Jr. had, quite a bit of doubters and haters in the Mavs fandom. And he was a frustrating player for sure at times, but people really undervalue the skill of just, if the ball comes to me, I'm shooting a three, and I am a good enough shooter that you have to always respect me and know where I am on the basketball court. So that's what DiVincenzo does provide. Yeah.
And he's got balls. He's hit some really big shots. He elicited the Mike Breen bang, bang after missing a three and then getting the long rebound and knocking it down. That's a huge playoff shot. So
the Mavs played right around the trade deadline, and the Knicks. I mean, they didn't have anybody. Like, genuinely, Brunson wasn't playing.
Yeah.
Their whole team was out.
Right.
And the Mavs found themselves in a complete and total bloodbath with this dead Knicks team because DiVincenzo was just going nuclear by himself pretty much in that game.
He's a really good
one
player.
of those guys.
I like him. Yeah.
He is. So that's one of the won'ts is, it's hard to win playoffs. It's really hard to win playoff series in the NBA, and especially if you're playing at least two really good teams in a playoff run. So that's one of them. Of course, the Mavericks are a really good team themselves. So teams are looking at the Mavs and saying the same thing, but you always have to mention it. Let's see, another one, another Will. I mean, their three-point shooting should be much better this year. It absolutely should.
Yeah.
In Luka's career here, no one shoots more corner threes in the NBA than the Dallas Mavericks. He generates so many corner threes. 12% of the Mavs threes last year were corner threes. That was the most in the league. However, after the trade deadline, they shot 34% on those, which was second to last.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has to do with just some guys getting cold, like Tim Hardaway Jr., who you expect to at least be somewhat reliable, just falling off of a cliff in the second half of the season. But PJ Washington has never really been a great corner three-point shooter in his career. He was really bad from the corner last year. Derrick Jones Jr., inconsistent three-point shooter his whole career, had on and off. Dante Exum, same thing. This year, I mean, Klay, you know who Klay is, right? Even if you want to factor in Klay's not the Klay he was in 2016, 2017, obviously. He's still one of the best three-point shooters to ever lace him up, and he's going to knock him down from the corner. Quentin Grimes, 44% on corner threes 2 years ago, his healthy season. Najee Marshall, 42% from the corner last year. So they're going to be firing so many great looks from three this year, and I think that their offense will be much better because of it.
I'm curious about this too. So with Klay and to help spacing, will he ever be in the corner, or is that not help as much spacing wise?
It just depends on the set they're running, but there's going to be plenty of times, especially when they run him, they start him on the strong and move him over to the weak. I mean, they're going to, man, I saw a set in the first game when he didn't play where they had Najee and a wheel. And I'm like, dude, that's going to be Klay. You're going to see different stuff that you haven't seen before. There's still, because Luka's so good at it, they're still going to be spread the floor, middle pick and roll heavy. Like, it'd be stupid to take that out of the offense, but I think you're going to see some motion sets. We were talking about the idea of, Jay Kidd going and talking to Phil Jackson. There's a reason for that. It's like, okay, we want to incorporate some of that movement and some of that motion and give teams other looks. And I think you're going to see him in a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, he'll definitely throw up some corner threes. And also there will be opportunities in transition because the Mavs won't be as fast as they were last year, I don't think, with Derrick Jones Jr. and Josh Green leaving, who were like their two best transition players last year. But there will be, Najee Marshall gets out in transition all the time, but he's more of a passer in transition than he is a finisher from what I saw. So there will be moments and opportunities for Klay to run the floor, run to a corner in transition, and shoot a three in transition, which is something he's really, really good at. So that's fun and exciting. It would be a disservice to Klay because I know Kidd had a quote that freaked people out where, or it might have been Cuban. I don't remember who said it exactly. I think it was Mark Cuban, where he was basically like, oh, Klay's not going to have to do all the motion stuff here anymore. He can just sort of park and shoot threes. And that does feel like a disservice to Klay if you're not utilizing one of his biggest strengths, which is shooting off of screens and movement shooting. So we'll see.
And I think the other thing too is, yes, you want to create chess situations for Luka, but you don't want defenses to sit on the same stuff over and over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to see wrinkles. You're going to see different looks. You're going to
see pick and pop. You're going to see Klay set ball screens and pop out.
Absolutely, you will, because he's going to be defended by a three, right? Or depending on who they put on Luka, they want to get those switches. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what Klay does, and that's one of my wants. And I wrote this down just because I needed another one. But if Klay really is washed, as some people say, which I don't think he will be. I mean, everyone destroyed him last year. He still averaged 18 points per game.
40%, 41%. Yeah. What was it?
Yeah, I mean 38% from three, which is still good. I mean, considering his volume, it was only the second time in his career he shot in the 30s from three. So I mean, I'll gladly take 18 points per game on 38% from three from our third option. That sign me up. But it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where even if Klay is, even a little bit more past his prime than we maybe were hoping, I don't think it derails the Mavs season like completely, because I do think that's why you went out and got guys like Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes. So it just speaks to their depth again.
So we talked about this earlier, and we were talking about the 2011 Mavs and how veterans had to put their egos aside and accept roles. And while we're just spitballing here, and one thing that does scare me is if Luka, Kai, and Klay none of them want to come off the court, right? And so those three guys are going to be out there. And Lively or Gafford's going to be out there, and probably PJ's out there. But if those three guys are going to be out there a ton and don't want to come off the court, it's going to be hard to take them off the court. But if those guys are willing to accept, hey man, in this moment, Najee needs to be out there or whatever, and just they're willing to let better defensive players get some of those crucial minutes, and their egos will allow those things to happen. I mean, that's what you hope to see. I guess what I'm trying to say is Klay is an enigma to me because I don't really know what to expect. Does he demand to start? Does he demand to play in crunch time? Is he not ever going to want to come out? Doesn't seem like that's who he is, but as we're just spitballing potential problems, it would be if guys didn't want to come off the court and let a better defensive player on.
Yeah, I mean,
you go first slightly.
Well, I was going to say that is a concern, obviously, where I do think there will be games, assuming everyone's healthy, where it might make sense for Klay to be on the bench and Najee or Grimes to be on the court for defensive reasons. And yeah, you do wonder if hopefully Klay's not like, dude, I'm fucking Klay Thompson. I was on the Splash Bros. Like I'm a multiple time champion, all NBA player, should have been top 75 player. Like I didn't leave Golden State to come here and come off the bench. He said all the right things, and I guess you'll never know until it happens. I just can't imagine him doing that, honestly, just from some of the stuff he said. It feels like he's so bought in to this team, and there's a reason he came here and took less money than what the Lakers are offering. It's because he thinks this team can win, and I think he's willing to sacrifice if needed. So I agree with all of that assessment. And again, we're not going to know until we get into it and we see how it all plays out. I thought, and I think you and I talked about this, Ben, the two best press conferences, and most of them suck. The two best press conferences I've ever been to was the one where we got J Kidd from the Nets and Dirk went and sat with the media watching that press conference, and the Klay Thompson introduction with Najee and Quentin. And to what Slightly's point, what he's saying, I was blown away with his attitude and the things he was saying. And it almost reminded me, it's different set of circumstances, but the wisdom and the sort of outlook he brought into it very much reminded me of how Kyrie approached the situation. Different set of circumstances, but where you are in your life and what you're willing to accept. And I think that the things he wasn't willing to accept in Golden State that pushed him to leave there completely had to do with that, the personalness of that situation and what they had been through and what certain guys, not even in a jealousy or immature way, but that is a different set of circumstances than what it is here. And so I don't think he's going to feel levels of disrespect if something happens to him here that happened to him in Golden State. I think he will approach it differently and understand it differently. And it is always going to be about trust. And that is why Kyrie is thriving here. He trusts Jason Kidd and he trusts Nico Harrison, and Cuban's not as prominent now, but he trusted Mark Cuban, and everything they said, they did. And I think if everything that Nico and Jay Kidd said to Klay Thompson when they were courting him, if everything they said to him, they do, I think he will accept situations in a way that he may not have in Golden State because he felt disrespected and he felt like he had been misled. And that's just a different environment. And I think hopefully it plays into the Mavericks' favor.
It's a great point. And Mavs fans want to blast Kidd, but like Kidd's ability to connect with the superstars is massively important, and they respect him as a fellow superstar. Slightly biased, dude. You're the fucking GOAT. We love you. Thanks for jumping
Thanks for
on with
having
us. For those who don't know, if they're under a rock, tell them how to follow you, where to follow you. Hype it up.
Oh, God. Let's see. Where do we start? There's a laundry list of places now. At Bias Slightly on Twitter, youtube.com/slightlybiased, playback.tv/slightlybiased. That's pretty much it.
Okay, very nice. Well, I look forward to getting out on the court with you at some point soon.
Yes.
And it's about a 30-year age gap here, but should be fun for you to score on me. Hey, dude, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
There he goes.
Adam.
Slightly biased. Absolute best. All right, that's gonna do it for us, and we're gonna wrap up here with the Mavs Soaktacular season preview special. Dude, I think we covered pretty much everything. Is there anything we left out?
No, it's funny. One thing, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time talking about him, but one thing that we left off was Daniel Gafford. What a badass backup center. Do they have the best backup center in the NBA?
Yes.
Certainly in consideration, because he's a starter on at least half the league, or at least a third of the league. He's a definitive starter. So that is a nice thing to have, man. And it's going to be really good for that. If Jaden Hardy is getting those minutes, to be out there on the floor with that lob threat, right? Or Kyrie playing with Jaden, as they do their rotations. That's a really nice thing to have.
The other, to that end, the other thing that I'd add is this roster, the way it's constructed, is so beautiful. And to your point, if you go back to June 2023 and you look at what it is now and how it's transformed,
right?
It's phenomenal. But they still have flexibility. Like, I would never want to think about this, but there are teams out there who would love to have Gafford as their starting center.
Absolutely.
And you talked about PJ Washington Jr. Like, if things aren't clicking for him and he wants a different situation, I'm not. Hopefully it never goes down that road. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there is still flexibility with movable assets that they have if they need to make an adjustment. I don't think they're going to need to, and I love the luxury of having a badass starting center as my backup center, but they do have that flexibility if they get into the season and need to make a change.
Okay, I thought what you were saying was that you were saying Kevin Durant would force a trade to Dallas and Gafford, PJ, and Jaden Harden would be the core. But I completely disagree with you on that. I can't believe you suggested that on a YouTube live stream. On a spectacular, man. That was completely irresponsible.
It would be. And this is something I've heard a lot. That is a nice package.
You'll pea hound you.
All right, there we go. There's the Soaktacular, our Mavs season preview special. Let's end it.
This has been another Iron Balls production.
Iron Ball!